Hello, Jacksonites. Welcome back to my Alien and Predator re-review series. Should just say Predator, but whatever. And today, me and good old Trevor boy
Howdy, everybody.
will be discussing another one of my favorite and, in my opinion, most underrated installments of the Alien and Predator franchise, with 2004's Alien vs. Predator, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson of Resident Evil infamy. Oh boy.
Yes, fortunately.
So yeah, Alien vs. Predator, you heard it right. I do think this is... I technically have reviewed this film before, but it was with my friend Grayson, and that video has long since been deleted. But I do think this is one of the most underrated installments of both the Alien and Predator franchise. And again, I consider this to be one of my favorite films, and I think it's an unsung masterpiece.
It does have quite a following now.
Well, yeah, of course, because there's a lot more Paul W.S. Anderson defenders out there, too. There's a lot of haters as well. Oof.
Yeah. And also, other than the general consensus, which unfortunately still is kind of unfair to a lot of these other installments, each movie seems to have its own following in the fandom.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your personal history with this movie? Mine's a little strange.
Okay. I think mine might be a little bit more in depth than probably some of my histories for these, but yeah. So not unlike Freddy versus Jason, this was the movie that finally got me to sit down and watch the other Alien and Predator movies, because I had always been fascinated and also kind of creeped out by certain aspects of them, particularly, like I mentioned in yesterday's review, Aliens and Predator. And yeah, this was the movie that finally got me to say, I want to actually watch these. And of course, the fact that it was PG-13, which to some degree kind of neuters it, but
yes.
I think this is one of the examples of a movie in a franchise that starts off hard R and then goes PG-13. This is one of the better examples of where it still is a decent movie.
Well, and also the studios learned their lesson, and they saw that the reaction to the PG-13 rating, and they actually said, "Oh, okay, fine, that's all right. We'll just go back to R." And they weren't dickheads about it too.
Yeah, and you could also argue that they still, even though they went back to R, they kind of still had to find their footing in terms of applying it to a movie that most everyone seemed to like. Although you could say that the entries since the AVP movies have been mixed anyway, whenever they went back to their solo franchises. But regardless, yeah, so this was the movie that got me to actually want to watch the franchises for either one of these. I didn't get to see it in theaters because
neither did I.
don't think anybody would have. Yeah, nobody would have went with me at the time. Actually, but every Alien and Predator movie since Requiem, I actually have seen in theaters, thankfully. So that's a nice treat, to varying degrees. So yeah, when I actually did see this movie, I picked up the DVD for my dad's birthday in January of 2005. And yeah, that's whenever we first watched it. Because back in the day, nowadays it doesn't take all that long for the physical media to come out. But actually, back in the day, there was a little bit of a delay. Like sometimes stuff wouldn't even come out until like early the next year. Like if it was a summer release, or like the main example that I think of is Jon Favreau's Elf. That came out like in Christmas 2003, I think, and it didn't come out until Christmas the following year on like video and whatnot, if I'm not mistaken.
Damn, really?
Yeah, it was just a really long time before it was available on home video. But yeah, this was kind of the same case with pretty much any other movie around that time. But anyway, yeah, we picked it up, watched the DVD a whole lot. This is the one of the two AVPs that Dad likes. Because there's certain genre trappings that he responds to, because he's also a big fan of The Thing, and I think he likes the
yeah, we're going to be talking about that a little bit, at least in my corner.
Oh, yeah, me me too, for sure. Spoiler, it's probably my first pro. But no, yeah, so I've actually watched this a whole lot through the years. In fact, that summer in 2005, I was a little obsessed with the movie and was watching it fairly frequently. And then it kind of cooled down, and then it kind of came back whenever I heard the sequel was coming out. Oh, I should also mention that even before this movie came out in theaters, I remember, because back in the day, we don't really do it anymore, people would go to like the site, the official site for a movie, like to check out trailers and, you know, whatever stuff they were using to promote it. And this was an example of one. I did this with Freddy versus Jason also, where I would visit the official site and look at like their wallpapers and like whatever they had over there to look at. And I remember doing that for this movie. And also I used to follow the site MovieWeb for movie news a whole lot. And again, whatever news pertained to this, I would follow it. So yeah, that was an interesting lead-up experience for it. But then back to actually watching it. I've watched it several times over the years. I've always found it enjoyable. Although, depending on my mood, there's things about how the Predators are handled that kind of bug me. And I do think that Paul Anderson kind of favors the aliens or the xenomorphs a little bit more. But yeah, still, this is... and another thing. Sorry, I'm so scatterbrained. I'm trying to remember all the different incidents here.
Yeah, you're cool.
There was another time, even though we had the DVD, where it was being offered on pay-per-view as a double feature with Aliens. And, I kind of got my parents to, actually buy that so we could watch them back to back. Even though we had tapes and, like the DVD for AVP, I still wanted to just have it to where they played automatically one after the other. And so that was another fun viewing experience with the movie. But yeah, so I've had a fairly fond history with this particular entry in the franchise for either. And I do agree with Nick that it is pretty underrated still to this day, although according to the different various ratings by Google users, this actually tends to be one of the more favored out of all 12 movies. But yeah, that's my history.
Well, for me, first off, can't do it with the mask anymore. Alien vs. Predator is an interesting film for me. I didn't know this thing was a thing until I was going over to... I knew of the comics because my stepdad had some comics. Actually, that was how I read the original run for the Alien vs. Predator comics that came out in '89. I read the first 6 issues that had dealt with, what was her name? Machiko's origin, like how she and Broken Tusk teamed up to take on a hive of Xenos. So I read those, but I didn't know that Alien vs. Predator was being made until one day, me, my stepmom, and my dad went over to my stepmom's parents' place, and they were doing something or other. So I just sat down on the couch and was just kind of doing nothing. But then my stepmom's dad came out and he put in a movie, and it was Alien versus Predator. And I was totally blown away. I was like, wait, this is a thing? Yeah, it just came out last year. Really? I had no idea. I never saw a trailer, never saw a poster, did not hear a damn thing about it, did not know it was a thing till I was sitting down and watching it. And I loved it. I was very impressed and very entertained and absolutely blown away by the film. Then quickly, my mom bought it for me at a flea market of all places, and I watched the shit out of this movie. This movie really, really, really stuck out to me and really entertained me. And like whenever I was feeling both an Alien and Predator itch, usually I would gravitate towards Alien versus Predator, and I would be very, very satisfied. Like this is one of those movies where not only do I watch the movie, but I watch all the special features as well. In particular, like the making of the effects featurette on the DVD. I really dig the shit out of this movie. I think it's a very good film. And yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. And I would rewatch it over and over again over the years, and I would just keep on digging it. And upon this most recent viewing, I still do love it. It's a very good movie, though now I do see a few problems, and I have quite a few nitpicks with the film. But overall, this, in my opinion, is an extremely solid movie.
I would agree.
So, with that being said, let us get into the plot, shall we?
Yes, indeed.
In 2004, a satellite detects a mysterious heat bloom beneath Bovatoya Island, an island about 1,000 miles off the coast of Antarctica. Wealthy industrialist Charles Bishop Wayland, played by Lance Henriksen, of course, discovers through thermal... How old is this motherfucker?
Oh, he's in his 70s, or he might be in his 80s now. He's up there.
He's 80.
Yeah.
He's been in so many fucking movies, it's not even funny.
Very genre friendly. He's definitely an icon of horror and sci-fi.
Yep. Discovers through thermal imaging that there is a pyramid buried 2,000 feet beneath the ice of Bovatoya. He attempts to claim it for his multinational communications company, Wayland Industries, a subsidiary of the Wayland Corporation, and assembles a team of experts to investigate. The team includes archaeologists, linguistic experts, drillers, mercenaries, and a guide named Alexa Lex Woods, played by Sanaa Lathan, I believe is how you pronounce her name.
I think it's Lathan, like Nathan, just with the nail.
Or yeah, Lathan, excuse me. As a Predator ship reaches Earth's orbit, it fires an energy beam aimed at the pyramid site. When the team arrives at the abandoned whaling station right above the heat source, they find a perfectly circular, unnatural tunnel drilled at a perfect 30-degree angle directly beneath the ice, running directly beneath the ice towards the pyramid. Wayland shows the team satellite images showing that the passage was not there the day before. The exploration team descend the tunnel and locate the mysterious pyramid and begin to explore it, soon finding evidence of a prehistoric civilization in what appears to be a sacrificial chamber filled with human skeletons. Inexplicably, all the skeletons appear to have ruptured rib cages. Wink, wink. Meanwhile, 3 Yautja members named Scar, Celtic, and Chopper arrive and kill the remaining team members on the surface. They make their way down to the pyramid and arrive just as the team unwittingly activates the structure and are trapped within it. The alien queen awakens from cryogenic stasis and begins to produce eggs. When the eggs hatch, several facehuggers attach themselves to humans trapped in the sacrificial chamber. Chestbursters emerge from the humans and quickly, we'll get to that later, grow into adult xenomorphs. Conflict erupts between the predators, xenomorphs, and humans, resulting in several deaths. Celtic and Chopper are unceremoniously, pun intended and no pun intended, are killed by a single xenomorph named Grid, and Wayland buys Lex and Italian archaeologist Sebastian De Rosa, played by Raul Bova, enough time to escape from Scar, giving his life in the process. Thus, another over-the-top Lance Henriksen death. The 2 witness Scar kill a facehugger awesomely, slicing it right in half. And a xenomorph also slicing its head clean in half with a glaive, as I mentioned from before unmasking and marking himself with the blood of the xenomorph. Or no, it was the facehugger, excuse me. After Lex and Sebastian leave, another facehugger attaches itself to Scar due to him not wearing his mask. Through translation of the pyramid's hieroglyphs, Lex and Sebastian learned that the predators have been visiting Earth for thousands of years. It was they who taught early human civilizations how to build pyramids and were worshipped as gods. Every 100 years, they would visit Earth to take part in a rite of passage by which several humans sacrificed themselves as hosts for xenomorphs, creating the ultimate prey for the Yautja to hunt. As a failsafe, if overwhelmed, the predators would activate a self-destruct device to eliminate the xenomorphs as well as themselves. The two deduce that this is why the current predators are at the pyramid, and that the heat bloom was a ruse to attract humans to the site for the sole purpose of making new xenos to hunt. Lex and Sebastian decide that the predators must be allowed to succeed in their hunt so that the xenos do not escape to the surface. Sebastian is captured by a xenomorph, leaving only Lex and Scar to fight the remaining xenos. Scar uses parts of a dead xenomorph to fashion weapons, using a xenomorph skull as a shield and sawing off a tail spike and tying it to a staff to make a makeshift spear, as Lex and Scar form an alliance, which is one of my favorite scenes. The xenomorph queen, using her own acidic blood, is freed from her restraints and, along with the other xenos, begin pursuing Lex and Scar. Just as they are about to escape, Scar detaches and uses a bomb on his wrist module to destroy the pyramid, which is a great moment of body language. He just points at his wrist and love it. As well as the remaining xenos and eggs, of which there are lots. Lex and Scar reach the surface, however the xenomorph queen has survived and continues chasing them. They defeat her by hooking her chains to the whaling post's water tank and knocking it over a cliff, dragging her to the ocean floor. Not before, unfortunately, the queen is able to kill Scar by impaling him with her tail spike, and he succumbs to his wounds and dies. A predator ship uncloaks and several other Yautja hunters appear. They retrieve their fallen comrade, and an elder predator presents Lex with one of their combi spears, or combi sticks, as a gift of respect. The other Yautja recognize her skill as a warrior by the symbol that Scar burned onto her cheek, the 2 slashes, before he died, using alien blood. The predator's spaceship flies off, leaving Lex behind. She walks to a snowcat and leaves the area, and the Yautja leaves Scar's body on a plinth in front of a window on the ship, but moments later, a Predalien chest burster erupts from Scar's chest, leading into the events of Alien vs. Predator Requiem. As a good twist, but still, I just wish that Scar didn't have to die, which kind of paints my opinion on something right off the bat, but whatever. Trev?
Yeah, so this is actually a very good, shall we say, creature feature plot. I think the problem that a lot of people who chastise this movie or are critical of it
is it's not an adaptation of the comics. Blah. Fuck off.
My thing is, it actually makes several references to the comic books. The most obvious one being the team up between Lex and the Predator, which is like you said happened with Machiko, and what was the other one's name?
Broken Tusk.
Broken Tusk. There we go. But yeah, so again, probably the rating has something to do with it. It kind of had a stigma that kind of cast a shadow on the movie, but also another thing is that the people who criticize it need to remember that it's not like one of the Alien movies, which always has some kind of subtext that is, would be too disturbing for a movie that ended up with this rating, but more like the Predator movies. This is just an action
creature feature,
sci-fi romp. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a good plot. I mean,
well, the next one definitely has those disturbing subtexts. But we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. It's funny though. It's just this movie delivers on its title. I mean, but it's one thing if it's just one or the other creature in their solo efforts. Even though I still consider this mainly part of the Predator series because they drive the narrative of this plot. It still delivers on that premise, and sure, it may be a little neutered, so to speak, but it still fulfills the promise of its title.
It's just like Freddy versus Jason. They say, this is Freddy versus Jason, and they give you Freddy versus Jason.
Well, and it speaks to the legacy of this movie, or just its impact. That there's some people, they're mostly younger, who actually don't refer to a singular Alien or Predator movie, or like in the case of Freddy versus Jason, a singular Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th. In fact, there's some people I know who saw Freddy versus Jason who didn't know about those franchises, believe it or not. But yeah, these two movies, they actually brought a new audience to the characters. And
the one that I've heard of the most, referring to Freddy versus Jason real quick, this could be applied to this as well. The most that I've heard is that they've heard of one or the other. Because a YouTuber that I follow, he's a big fan of Freddy versus Jason. He was a Nightmare on Elm Street junkie. He knew of Friday the 13th, but he never saw one. So this was his kind of first true introduction to Jason. And I actually did know someone who was a big Alien fan, but he wasn't familiar with Predator, and this caused him to go on to see the Predator movies.
Well, on that note, this is also pretty much what revived Predator as a character, because Alien had 4 movies to itself and has probably the more impactful legacy in terms of what the first one did for film history.
Yes.
But yeah, it definitely, for one thing, if we didn't have these 2 AVP movies, we probably wouldn't have had the subsequent Predators or the Predator and a new movie that's coming on the way.
Mm-hmm.
Or even finally the Alien prequels. But,
different story.
But yeah, but back on the note of Freddy versus Jason, or even just all 4 of these characters, like there was this one guy that I knew in school who knew of Freddy versus Jason, but didn't know that Jason was from Friday the 13th. And, being the nerdy kid that I was, I researched these movies, and I was like, well, yeah, these guys are from this. And then that was kind of a lesson in realizing that general audience members usually don't tend to care too much. They just care about the movie at hand. So,
sadly,
for some people, it's just Freddy versus Jason. And I still like my sister's fiance, or one of my sister's fiancés. He still always, if he sees an Alien or a Predator, he always says, he always brings up Alien versus Predator. So that goes to show me that he probably didn't see any of the other Alien or Predator movies, but he knows about AVP. So I say all this to just illustrate the point that even if this movie may have been disappointing for some people, it still made an impact. Usually whenever you cross 2 iconic characters, whether they're monsters or superheroes or whatever, whenever you do that, that creates some kind of pop culture blip, or this ping on the map that kind of just draws the attention of more people than you would usually get.
Like what's happening with Godzilla versus Kong right now.
Yeah, and that actually happened the first time they did that too, with Godzilla and Kong, because that was for the longest time until the Heisei series, the highest grossing Godzilla or Kong movie.
No, it wasn't even that. King Kong versus Godzilla was the highest grossing Godzilla movie ever until Shin Gojira.
Yeah, and I do believe Godzilla versus Mothra from the Heisei series, it came close.
Yeah, that one was close, but that's because there's a shit ton of Mothra fans.
Well, and we also have to consider that the Heisei movies, minus the very first one, really didn't have much international play, if any at all. So that's mostly just a Japanese box office kind of deal. But yeah, back to the plot. There are a couple of moments here, that are actually mentioned in the little synopsis that I do really like. Or there's one that I'm critical of, and there's one that I really like. I think the moment the Predators first show up is actually probably the best Predator moment in the movie, because they're cloaked and they're killing people, and the victims don't really know what's going on. And a criticism of the plot, and you mentioned how Lance Henriksen had an epic death. I think it's better in the theatrical version because it kind of is awkwardly edited in the longer version. Although they show additional scenes showing Lex's reaction because they're supposed to have a bond, the two characters. But it just kind of throws off that instant, I spared your life. Oh, you're going to torch me? Fuck you. And then, not spears him, but, stabs him with his blades, his gauntlet. In the longer version, it just kind of drags out clumsily. And that's really, aside from the digital blood, the only moment in the longer version that I don't care for.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. But no, after all that rambling, this is a satisfying plot, at least for me as a fan.
I agree too. I wasn't really expecting obviously, because I didn't know about it until the day that I watched it, but I've never really been burned by the fact that this wasn't an adaptation of the comics. Partially because if this was a straight up adaptation of the comics, this would have been much more of an alien. Well, it already is a pretty big alien movie, but this definitely would have firmly cemented this in the Alien series, because the original comics do take place in the future. It's like a space cyberpunk version of the future, but it's still definitely in the Alien continuity. Whereas obviously here it takes place in modern day. But I also do think it just is a good progression of the Predator series, because that's also easier to pull off because Predator takes place in modern day. But no, I've never been burned by the notion that this wasn't an adaptation of the comics. It would have been cool, of course, but I'd also think if you're to do a straight up adaptation of the original comics, don't make it a movie, make it a show, like a miniseries. The original, what was it, like 8 issues or so of the original Alien vs. Predator comics? That would make like a great HBO Max or Disney Plus original show.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I really hope that we get a new AVP something at some point here in the future, because it's been long overdue for them to try and do something with it again.
Yeah, we'll talk about tomorrow when we review AVPR, the planned and canceled third film that they wanted to make.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say real quick that I actually wasn't aware of the comics until after this movie. There was actually a featurette on the basic DVD, not the special edition that I own, my father's copy. There was like a little featurette that kind of went over just the general history of the concept, which sadly isn't included on my copy, which sucks, but I digress. And also, like you said, Nick, this is a natural progression from Predator 2, because probably the biggest tease for where they could go in the future from Predator 2, even if you didn't know about the comics or the video games,
was the Xenomorph skull shown at the end of Predator 2.
Exactly. So then the idea is make a Predator movie, but the subject of their hunt is the Xenomorphs, which I think this movie and its sequel do deliver on.
Exactly. So yeah, I think the plot is just fine. It's a really, really good pairing and blending of the alien and Xenomorph mythos. It promises Alien versus Predator, and it fucking delivers on Alien versus Predator. So, yeah, I'm very happy with this movie's plot. So, how many pros and cons do you have, Trev?
Well, I tried to get to 6, but I couldn't think of a specific thing to be 6, so it's really just 5. But these are kind of like big things for the movie.
I have 8
And
pros.
Okay, so you always tend to, in some respects, go into details that I missed, which is nice because we balance each other out. And also my cons only have 2, and they're probably overall mainly nitpicks, especially since I gave this 2 rewatches recently, and the second time any of those nitpicks were kind of lessened after the second rewatch. So yeah. So my first pro, for me, the thing that really stands out to me that actually is probably better than its follow-up, and which is refreshing compared to the comics that some people tend to worship. I like the setting of this movie. And I think it's actually a very important, maybe, I guess it appeals to a certain trope or like an archetype that you see in sci-fi and even horror movies to a certain extent. Probably the most famous example in terms of quote-unquote contemporary or modern horror would be John Carpenter's The Thing. It utilizes the Antarctic.
I'll talk about that a little more when I get to my pros, but I'm glad that you picked up on that too.
Well, yeah, and I think that's something that appeals to my dad as well, because he's also a fan of The Thing. And it just appeals to, so like if you don't like a predator running around or even xenomorphs running around in like a civilized setting like we see like in Predator 2, the Predator Requiem, if you like the isolated trying to survive trope in this genre, then AVP does deliver on it. There's also a good sense of discovery, which is very popular, especially in science fiction. That's also at play here. I'm not much of a H.P. Lovecraft fan, but it also kind of harkens back to At the Mountains of Madness, which apparently is set in Antarctica. And, that's something that's been very influential on sci-fi and horror since then. So that's probably what, even if I'm not a big fan of Lovecraft, a lot of these filmmakers who make these kind of movies, they usually tend to be fans of Lovecraft. So they kind of tie back into that trope or that archetype that was set up. And, just the whole idea of a pyramid, beneath the Antarctic ice, it's a unique aspect that adds to the Predator lore. The fact, or even the fact that they're actually the extraterrestrials that influenced ancient society. There's an author, I can't remember their name, it's probably on Wikipedia, whose works were influential on this. Also Chariots of the Gods, which was mentioned in The Thing as well. It's just kind of funny how all these things have a similar synergy, and I think that's picked up on by genre fans. So yeah, and also I just want to kind of knock what came after this movie and the fact that people trash talk like the plot and whatnot. Basically, what they did whenever they decided to go back to the solo entries.
Eric Von Daniken?
Yeah, I was going to look up his name, but I didn't want to butcher it. But yeah, that's him. Yeah, apparently his works, I think he was the one who wrote Chariots of the Gods.
Yeah, it is.
Wasn't he, I think. Yeah, so yeah, definitely, like I said, that was mentioned in The Thing, that's mentioned here. So Anderson, Carpenter, maybe Ridley Scott to an extent, are all aware of these kind of archetypes that are set up in the genre, whether it's movies or actually literature. But no, it's funny to me that people trash talk this movie, but yet Prometheus and before it Predators actually take elements from this movie and apply them to their own plots. And the trio of Predators is reused in Predators. The team up between a human and a predator is reused in Predators. Prometheus is about a bunch of experts from different fields assembling together for a wealthy benefactor, a Wayland, who they don't go to Antarctica, but they go off into space and they encounter a pyramid, and a culture that had some kind of history with something unsavory. In this case, xenomorphs in different forms. But yeah, it's just funny to me that again the trash talk for this, and yet the two people who kind of were talking trash ended up using these plot elements in their movies. But I digress. The setting for this is part of why it's so compelling, and it just adds to the plot, in my opinion. My second pro is the effects, which are pretty good here.
Oh, yeah. Excuse me.
There's not any human gore because this is PG-13.
Well,
but
there is, but there also isn't. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, well, I'll just go ahead and say I actually don't mind it for the most part. Yeah, there's only one really bad scene in the extended version of this. I'm not going to say, well, I don't think it's a director's cut because I think Paul was fine with the cut that was released in theaters. It's just extended. There's only one really bad CGI blood moment for me, and it's whenever, what's the character's name? Max Stafford? Yeah, Stafford. Whenever he gets trapped in one of the Predator nets, the blood that they applied in the extended version of that scene is just the most obviously fake.
Oh, the net. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the Predator net, the one that constricts and cuts.
Which is a terrible way to die.
Oh, yeah. The actor also sells it, even if the extra blood kind of ruins it in that version, because of the sounds that he makes whenever he's, being constricted by it. But yeah, I do think the blood for like whenever the spear goes to that one guy that's on the surface whenever the predators arrive, I think that's handled well, but it's not super focused on. I think the one chest burster moment with Rousseau is okay. But yeah, anyway, the effects, the actual practical effects, which ADI, Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis are obvious major
fucking fantastic.
This is definitely, I would say, like the pinnacle of their Alien work, because they took over in Alien 3, continued in Alien Resurrection, and then here they handle the big girl herself, the Queen, which was originally a Stan Winston creation. Even though Tom and Alec were actually part of the crew on Aliens, here they were actually in charge of the whole thing.
And she looks amazing.
Indeed, like whenever she wakes up, not to steal your thunder, Nick, but off camera you were telling me how whenever she was waking up, she looks like a real xenomorph, waking up after a long, sleep in ice. And even the CGI effects, although considering this movie's from 2004,
I've seen worse.
Things date, unfortunately.
Obviously, like very 2004, but they don't. Well, they use a fair bit of CGI, but they don't overuse it. They use it when the practical effects aren't applicable.
Yeah, so it's mainly for Xenos, like full body shots, for them to do things that you expect a xenomorph to do. Because in like all the older movies, well, aside from a kind of, I won't say it's super crappy, but it's not as good as it could have been. The digital implementing of the rod puppet from Alien 3 is an example of the limitations of the practical full body stuff. Although the Queen did look very good in the original Aliens, but most of the time, whenever they don't really ever show the full body in the first 3 Alien movies, so you just have to kind of imagine like their physical agility and whatnot. But then Alien Resurrection started dabbling in full CGI aliens, and the underwater part of that movie is pretty impressive. And then here. It makes sense, like for the scene in the past where there's just like a massive swarm of them, that obviously would be CGI.
There was one shot where there was a few dudes in suits. It was when the Predator is being taken down with the beeping wrist bomb.
Mm-hmm.
There was dudes in suits there. I could tell because of the way they were moving. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But it's like you said, it's for shots where the practical probably still couldn't pull it off. But overall, aside from I think some of the cloak shots for the Predator, which are all CGI and not anywhere near as experimental as the first 2 Predator movies, those are obvious CGI shots.
But they look good.
And there's the one shot with Scar leaping and stabbing the Queen through her head.
That one looked good,
but still good. It's actually a really good shot. But there's also miniatures that aren't talked about very often in this movie. I think this is probably one of the last movies in the genre that I can recall that used noteworthy miniatures. And you actually don't even realize they're miniatures until they point it out in the behind the scenes. So all these different things, like the miniature for the Bovatoya Island Station. That's like whenever it collapses, that's all a miniature with CGI enhancement,
which is fine.
Yeah. But yeah, the effects in this movie, even if you have some issues with like the tone, which is also affected by the rating, you can't slouch this movie. You can't criticize this movie's effects legitimately, I feel, because it's actually probably one of the best showcases in the entire franchise. Whether, that goes for Alien or Predator. So yeah, definitely a major pro for this movie. Pro number 3, not a whole lot to say here, but they are better than the next movie. The characters, Lex, Wayland, Sebastian, they serve their purpose. I mean, their dialogue there's a lot of exposition and whatnot. But there is
which thankfully never gets stale.
Yeah, there's a little bit of heart. There's a little bit of you feel a little bit of a connection to the point where you care about at least the main 3 characters.
Trio, yeah.
The main trio, yeah. And like it's a smart idea. If you're gonna do a Predator sequel, but you're gonna cross over with Alien, you can start to slip in some prequel elements. And that's why we have a Wayland here, and he looks like the Bishop android, implying that he is the person who would eventually develop that technology, or at least he was the person behind the money, because I think it was later explained that Yutani was where the technological aspect of the company came from. But no, the characters are fine here. There's a nice bonding moment between Lex and Wayland, where she talks about her dad and his exploits in the past, and it shows that she kind of has a somewhat father-daughter bond with Wayland. It's not super developed, but
it didn't really need to be, but you get that sensation that there's more to their connection than just employer and employee. Like she cares for his well-being and he cares for her well-being. It's nice. It was kind of like a less is more situation. What's here is fine.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it's not like a heavy drama or anything, but it is enough to where there is investment. And there's some people who say you don't care about any of the characters in this movie.
I disagree.
And I would have to disagree. I would have to disagree, because I do think there is some element of heart. And based on the writers for this movie, I think this actually probably has to do with Anderson himself. And actually, Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett, did I say his last name right?
Possibly, yeah.
But anyway, the original writers for Alien, they actually contributed to this script. And also the writer for Requiem was here too, and I think it just goes to show that he was obviously the one who contributed the least based on how the second movie turned out. His name is Shane Salino. But no, yeah, anyway, the trio, Sebastian is basically just the scientist character, but he is still sympathetic. This mainly comes across in the scene where he's about to have a chest burster come out of him, and it does have somewhat of an impact, or at least enough to where you actually care about the fact that he's about to experience that violent death that we've seen in the Alien movies.
Which is, I don't know if I've said this before, but that's got to be one of the absolute worst ways to die.
Yeah, and the actor sells it too, so
Well, both having a chest burster kill you and also experiencing a head bite from a xenomorph. Like, ugh.
Oh yeah, exactly. And the supporting cast, most of them are where the fodder come into play.
Yes, but that's kind of to be expected.
There's two characters, and yeah, there's two characters though. Let me see. Miller, the chemical engineer, played by Ewan Bremer, who DCEU fans might remember as one of Wonder Woman's posse in the first movie.
Oh yeah, he's the sniper dude.
Yeah, he's also in the Rundown with The Rock. He's the pilot who
oh yeah
in there.
Where's my Jeep?
The cows are on the ground. You know, those are the main things I recognize him from. I also recognize Raul Bova from a movie called Under the Tuscan Sun with Diane Lane. It's a movie my mom really likes, and I saw him in there. I was like, oh, it's Sebastian from Alien vs. Predator. But also, okay, so Dr. Miller and another guy, Verhaden.
I recognize him because of his Glasgow smile. He was in Braveheart, and he also was one of my favorite characters in Sons of Anarchy. Oh, fuck. What the hell is his name?
In the show?
Yeah, in the show. Oh, fuck. What the hell's his name?
But no, yeah, there is some recognizable people in here. Oh, and also Colin Salmon, who plays Stafford. He's in Punisher Warzone. He's on the show Arrow. He's in a few of the James Bond movies as an MI6 agent. So yeah, there's some recognizable faces in here. But back to the character thing, between Miller and Verhaden, they start off kind of antagonistic with each other. It's developed more in the extended version.
Yeah, because he just finds them annoying.
Yeah, but over the course of their experience in this situation, whenever they're trapped together, for one thing, Verhaden realizes that Miller actually isn't a pushover because he kind of takes command of the situation whenever they're trapped in the maze. And yeah, even though they're both about to be captured and taken to the nest, that's pretty much the moment where their relationship reaches a development from where it started, and the fact that they're now I guess forced to kind of work together. Or
Tommy Flanagan, that's his name.
Yeah. I was gonna look it up too, but
he plays Verhaden. He plays, what the hell is his name in Sons of Anarchy?
But oh yeah, I also recognized him, like you said, from Braveheart. But no, yeah, that's like the last thing I'll say for the characters is that there is some nice moments here that keep you entertained whenever the monsters aren't on screen.
Chibbs. He plays Chibbs in Philip Chibbs Telford in Sons of Anarchy. He's the one who comes up with the name Jackie Boy for Jax Teller in that show. It's also where I got the name for Jackie Boy when I started calling him Jackie Boy.
Oh, there you go. Comes full circle. So yeah, folks, there's actually a lot of stuff here that branches off into other things that you might have seen if you're, well, even if you're not a genre fan, if you've seen some movies. So yeah, anyway, that I definitely think the characters, especially compared to, despite the potential for the next movie, over the next movie, these guys are certainly more investment worthy.
Oh boy, we're gonna have a field day tomorrow.
All right, and then pro number 4, second to last. I actually really like the score for this movie.
This is probably my least favorite of the whole series, if I'm being honest.
No, I can see that, but
it's not
Closer.
It's not bad. It's just kind of generic. It doesn't sound like either the Alien or Predator franchise, which you could say that makes this one a bit more unique because it's the only one that has unique music. But to me, it's just kind of generic creature feature music. Again, it's not bad. It's just nothing special.
Well, I think my favorite part of it is the theme that plays like whenever they're descending down the tunnel, or it also plays over the first part of the end credits. There's also another moment where it plays. It kind of does evoke the Predator theme a little bit, and I feel like it's kind of the Predator part of this theme, or the music for this movie. And the rest of it, again, it does linger into being generic. That's, as it turns out, something that the next movie would improve upon by actually including bits from the Alien and Predator movies.
Yes.
But it still sets the proper tone. There's a nice sense of mystery and creepiness, and mainly action and adventure. Because I definitely think another plus to add for this being more of a Predator movie, even if it. Well, I'll get into that with my first con, but still, it lends itself more to being a Predator type of flick, because there is this sense of mystery and isolation and action to the whole scenario, and I think
suspense.
The music brings that across. Even as a fan of the other movies, I would have preferred some more obvious theme callbacks. It still serves its purpose. And then the final pro, which I actually kind of got into whenever I was talking about the setting, is the mythos. I think this movie has some very neat mythos that it adds to the either franchise, really. Thus far, we really don't know where Ridley Scott is heading with his Alien movies that he's doing now, because he seems to just kind of get lost off in the weeds. This provides a more satisfactory prequel story, for one thing, because it's just direct. We find out, oh, okay, so predators are connected to. They may not necessarily be the creators of the xenomorphs, but they are still involved with them somehow, and it is because of their hunt that their adolescents in their species undertake their manhood ritual. It is because of that the Wayland Corporation has their first encounter with the xenomorph, which of course is expanded upon in the next movie a little bit. Sadly, it kind of ends, but there's unlike with how like Alien Covenant ends in terms of what it's building as prequel stuff. The AVP movies, there's enough planted there where you don't need elaboration. It'd be nice if you had more, but you get the gist of where it's going. You see the first exposure to xenomorphs that both Wayland and Yutani have, which establishes their interest. And then Predator technology, which is also a good follow-up from Predator 2. Predator technology is what is ended up being used for what will one day be space travel. So yeah, it's just all. It's something that I don't think these movies are given enough credit for. Is that they actually do a good. They do their part for the mythos of either franchise, and that's probably a great takeaway whenever you have something crossover. Is that both franchises end up benefiting from the matchup. So yeah, that's my last pro.
Which again is a shame that the Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th franchises couldn't have continued on from Freddy versus Jason's establishment, because would have been like a nice, like a nice acknowledgement if there were to be future Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th franchises. If like there was a scene or two that made a couple callbacks to that one incident when both of these guys beat the shit out of each other. Yeah, just a shame. Well, then again, this movie came after that, so this was definitely when studios nailed the crossover a bit better.
They realized there was more potential. They realized there was actual potential there. And whenever Freddy vs. Jason came out, they weren't expecting it to be the success that it was. And in addition to that, they were going to bring Ash into the Freddy vs. Jason fold. And Sam Raimi, unfortunately, was kind of the roadblock there, at least from what I've heard.
Which I find to be odd, because you'd think he would just be like, hell yeah, let's do this shit.
I guess at the time he probably had his own ideas for what he wanted to do as a sequel at some point, which I guess we eventually did get with Ash versus Evil Dead. But whenever I watch that show, I'm thinking a lot of this is very similar to stuff they did in the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash comics, or at least that first series they did. And it just makes you think, why do some of these creators think that they can do better whenever these crossovers actually do these ideas first and probably better? So I guess it's a good thing that Alien versus Predator, or Fox in this case, realized that they could keep on going down this route. It's just unfortunately some of the ideas that John Davis, the producer for the Predator series, approved, because he was all in for these two movies. I don't blame him for AVP. Requiem, I think they needed to work on a little bit longer. But yeah, definitely you could tell that they were starting to see the potential for the crossover. But It was a little short-lived at the time.
Sadly. Well, I also think Sam Raimi may have just been busy with Spider-Man at the time. So maybe that was the biggest roadblock for why Ash wasn't brought in, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is kind of a shame. Like what James Rolfe said in his Friday the 13th videos, it's just a shame that, because there was a bit of a crossover boom in the early 2000s, and it just kind of came and went with Freddy versus Jason and Alien versus Predator, but in a different way. And now, of course, it's back with Godzilla versus Kong. But it's just a shame that there's so many studios out there that have an iconic character that fans have been wanting to see fight another one for so long. But the biggest thing that's holding them back is money and greed, because they don't want to split 50% of the profits, and they don't want to acknowledge that one character is better than the other, or like they don't want to get into the whole my character's better. No, my character's better. No, mine is better kind of bullshit. And it's like with what James said, 50% is better than what these ideas are making now, which is nothing. Like, who wouldn't want to see Jason versus Michael, or Freddy versus Pennywise, or Jason versus Leatherface, or Chucky versus Leprechaun, or Leprechaun versus Freddy? There's so many of these various crossover ideas that would be so. Or the biggest one to me, and probably Trev as well, and many and more of our fans, Godzilla versus Gamera. There's so many crossover ideas out there, but it's just such a shame that these studios can't just get their head out of their ass. Well, maybe with the success of Godzilla versus Kong, we can see more stuff like that in the future. But yeah, if you're a crossover fan, there's really you're kind of grasping at straws there for legit crossover ideas. But whatever.
Well, yeah. One more note. Well, one more thought on that note. Also, some of the creators, like Ridley Scott, James Cameron, and Sigourney Weaver, all looked down upon the Alien versus Predator idea. Sigourney had herself killed off in Alien 3 because she thought Alien versus Predator was going to be the next thing at that point in time. Ridley Scott, his whole thing speaks for itself. James Cameron, he famously said that if they did AVP, it'd be like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, which would be just the two IPs, the studio having its two IPs play off each other just for the sake of money. And it's like, sure, I mean, you're making movies to make money anyway in some fashion. So it's like, why don't you just let it do it? Or just let them do it?
Or why not just have fun with the concept? Like, who wouldn't want to see Frankenstein fight the Wolfman?
Which is also referenced at the beginning on the TV at the start of this movie.
Yeah, that's right. Which, how did Universal let them get away with that? Whatever.
Well, somebody asked him, but and one more note finally is it's funny that James Cameron said that, because out of the three Alien franchise people that dismissed the idea, he ended up actually liking the first AVP. But I also think that it stroked his ego a bit, because the Alien Queen was used the best that she's been since Aliens. So there's that.
True. Yeah.
So what are your pros, my friend?
So I have 8 pros. A few of them are pretty similar to Trev. So pro number 1 is I do like the cast. Yes, a lot of them are cannon fodder characters, but what the hell else are you going to have to spawn some Xenos? Especially with this movie having a big aliens vibe. Of course, with the addition of the Queen Alien. But the main characters I think you do tend to care for them. Specifically, Sebastian, Lex, and what the hell's his first name? I'll just say Wayland.
Charles.
I do like the dynamic between Lex and Wayland. It is kind of like a father-daughter thing, or like a mentor and student type thing where, at first Lex just kind of not really, he doesn't really acknowledge. It's hard to describe. The best I can do it is he underestimates slightly Lex's abilities, with her skills and tools of the trade. She kind of not really puts him in his place, but kind of wakes Wayland up and makes him realize that, she's definitely the best in her field. And anything that she says it with meaning and experience. Because I get the sense that, like...
Huh? People aren't expendable. They can't just be switched out for somebody else all the time. Sometimes the best person for the job is one of a kind.
Yeah, which is a bit inconsistent, especially in the extended version, because, Max asks him, what did this man die for? Making history. Which kind of goes against his attitude towards Lex. But one thing that really stuck out to me that I really liked is when Max, who's a total dick in this movie, who also played the commando leader in the first Resident Evil movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there's the Paul connection.
Max and a few other guys wanted to stay down and study the temple, but Lex puts her foot down and says, no, we're going to go back. You wanted to be the first to claim it, and we are. No one else is going to come here and say this is mine. We're going to go back. And then Max looks over at Bishop. I'll just call him Bishop. Fuck it. And Bishop just goes...
Oh, it's Charles. It's Charles, by the way. That's his first name.
Okay, then Charles. Charles just goes, you heard her. She knows more than you. Which if somebody was to say that... Okay, so Max is this movie's version of It 2011's... I just totally forgot his name. The dickhead.
The version of that dickhead.
What the hell is... Strausser? No. Or Strauss. I don't fucking know. That dickhead from 2011. Max is... I got a huge vibe from him in this movie. But no, I like the dynamic between Lex and Charles. And of course, another one of my favorite scenes is when Lex finds that Charles is sick. Do you think he had cancer, or do you think he just had like a really bad cold?
Oh, it had to be some kind of cancer, but because whenever Scar initially lets him go, he does the scan, and he realizes that he's ill, he's sick, so it wouldn't be fair to his code if he killed him. But again, he pursues it and arms himself with a weapon, so then he's fair game. But yeah, whenever he does that scan, it looks like it's some kind of cancer.
See, I don't really know, because I imagine if you have a really bad cold, like if you have bronchitis or something, your lungs are going to look fucked up if you do a body scan. But it just did stuck out to me. Like, I'm not really sure now. Is it bronchitis or is it cancer? I couldn't really tell.
I guess it could be a really bad case of bronchitis, because that has killed people before. But
and also he's coughing like crazy. If someone had... Like, to me, that came off more as someone who has like either really bad asthma or is just like fighting off bronchitis, because that's not really like a medicine thing. It's just so someone can get some more oxygen in their system. So like if they're having a coughing fit, like if someone has cancer, that's more of a really raspy, nasty, guttural, throaty cough. This just sounded like a bad cold. But whatever, that's just a side thing. But no, when she discovers that he's sick, and at first she says, just go stay on the ship. You're sick. You don't need to be here. And he's not a dick about it, but he kind of like a dad, he sort of puts his foot down and says, hey, I'm a grown man. I want to come along and I want to help. And then she kind of takes it upon herself to look after him throughout the movie, kind of like, what she was doing with her dad, and that's one of my favorite lines too. You think that's the last thing that your dad remembers? The pain? Or drinking champagne with his daughter at 14,000 feet in the air? I like that connection that they had. It was very much like kind of like father-daughter or mentor and student type thing. It's nice.
Well, so more to the point of the inconsistency you pointed out, like whenever he's looking at the Predator gun and he's kind of in awe of it, I think that he goes back and forth between being so caught up in the fame of this historical find that he's made, but he's still going through that arc where he is taking to heart what Lex told him. So I don't think it's super inconsistent, but he just kind of gets caught up in the glamour of
fair enough.
The potential for their situation. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
Sebastian too. Yeah, he's a bit of like a typical scientist, and he's just the one there to provide exposition. But excuse me. But at least he's not useless. Like he tries to help out. Like he tries to fight off Celtic. He tries to free Max by pulling out a knife, which just totally cuts right through the blade. And he saves Lex. He helps out Charles, and it's kind of sad when he dies. Like you was like, oh come on, why did he have to die? And also so we're going to talk about Lex. Lex is one of my favorite leads in the entire Alien and Predator franchise. If there's any other substitute for Ellen Ripley, Lex is definitely it. She's not a woke bitch.
Yeah, well, that wasn't a problem back in the mid-2000s, thankfully.
Well, true, yeah, which I'm sure there's going to be some people that are trying to be woke that do watch this movie and say, oh, yeah, she's a strong female character. She is. She's the Ripley kind of strong female character. She's not a bitch. She's not woke. She's not anti-man, super feminist. She deals with the men. She puts her foot down. She proves herself, and she can also fight. And she goes toe-to-toe with both the men and the monsters. And she's not a bitch about it. She's very likable in the process. Like, unlike so many other woke feminist bullshit assholes nowadays, where they look at men with disdain, she just, works and looks at them like any other human being. And I like that little kind of playful banter that she has with Miller, one being with the camera when they're flying to Bovatoya. Miller's like, oh, I should have gotten the picture of the BNT.
PSR.
Wait, no. Oh, PSR, excuse me. And then she says, well, PSR is point of safe return, meaning we've gone past the point where we can no longer fly back. Oh. And then there's the penguin scene where, Miller is getting spooked. Lex spooks him and says no one is to run off alone. There's something here. Listen. Then comes out the asshole squawking penguin. They like snicker, and then she's like, careful, they bite, which they do.
Yeah.
Penguins are dicks. So I like her witty banter with everyone, and anyone who decides to kind of like throw their 2 cents to go against what she's trying to do, She's not a bitch about it, but she firmly puts her foot down and says, no, this is how it's going to go. And I'm one of those people that tends to be a bit blunt with people. So if they're doing something that's stupid, I turn around and I put them in their place and I make them realize bluntly the error of their ways and what would be the consequence of them pursuing the error of their ways. And she does that too. And everyone who is put in their place by her, they acknowledge what they're saying and they turn themselves around. So yeah, Lex is awesome, and obviously she is a bit of a damsel in distress for a decent chunk of the movie. But once she teams up with Scar, she kind of grows a backbone. But she still has those human emotions. That being when she has to shoot Sebastian. Like she obviously has a hard time with doing it. Like when she shoots him, she's holding a gun and she's like shaking. Then she just drops it and walks away. But then after that, I think that kind of like toughened her skin because then she's like, fuck, burn them all. And right as Scar's about to be killed, there she is jamming that spear into the queen's neck. And she also knows how to think on her feet because she finds the queen's leash. She ties it around that water tank, and she's the first one to come up with that idea. And so this is going to lead right into pro number 2. So finish up. The characters are great. Yes, there's some cannon fodder, but there's some good chemistry. There's some good banter, good dialogue. And I think the character is a bit more deeper than you realize. And Lex is a badass. This will lead into pro number 2, Scar. I fucking love Scar. Scar is debatably my favorite Predator. I am pretty partial towards Dark from the Alien vs. Predator PS3 game because he's just a total juggernaut. And also Wolf, too. He's a pretty big juggernaut as well. But I absolutely adore Scar. I love his personality. I love his, because he's one of those, he's a bit like a prototype fugitive Predator in that he has a bit of a sense of humor to him. And there's more to his character than just being a mindless killing machine. Like
he's young and cheeky.
Huh?
He's young and cheeky.
Yeah.
It's kind of a teenage humor, to be honest.
Yeah, like when the most obvious one is when he's taking off the xenomorph's skull. He takes out his knife and like draws Lex in, and then spooks her by triggering the head bite mechanic with the xenomorph head. And Lex just kind of gives him a look like, very funny. But I absolutely love Scar. He's a total badass, a total juggernaut. And his chemistry with Lex, because, of course, everybody was just thinking, that he's constantly going to be trying to kill her and such. I actually did not see the team up coming, if I'm being honest. I was hoping the whole time, are they going to team up with the humans? And I was very happy when they did, because I just didn't see it coming. And I think it's pulled off perfectly. He's able to help her kind of come out of her shell and embrace her more badass side. And even though it is brief, technically in the context of the film, you do get the sense of camaraderie between the two. And the body language with Scar and how he acts around her and how she acts around him. Even though there's really no words spoken, you get the sense that they are thinking on the same wavelength. Like when she boots up the sled to get out of the pyramid, she jumps on and he jumps on because he knows what's going on. He also comes to Lex's rescue when she's about to be killed by the Queen. And then, of course, the pinnacle of that is when he removes his mask, which one little minor nitpick I will say, just to kind of get ahead of myself real quick about the effects. This is something that kind of bugged me a little bit. The two cables that attach Scar's mask to his face, they kind of just like stick out at an awkward angle to me. Am I the only one who noticed that?
I think I do from time to time.
minor thing. But anyway, so when he removes his mask, he says so much with his eyes and his face, which I also feel like him being cheeky, like when he takes his mask off, he roars at her just to kind of spook her a little bit, just to see how he would react. But then, he marks her face, and right after he does that, she raises the spear, and he kind of like bows his head to her, like as a acknowledgement of respect. So I absolutely adore Scar. And I'm just going to give this away. I wish he didn't have to die. I really wish he didn't die. Because he's such a good character, and he doesn't speak a single word this whole movie. And also him, I'm kind of all over the place with Scar. I do like that he realizes that he can't speak Lex's language, but he knows the basic, this will blow up type thing. Love that. So it goes to show that Scar definitely is, if he was to live, I think Scar would be the one out of these three teenagers that would have turned into an elder had he not died.
Yeah.
Pro number 3 is the creepy atmosphere of this movie. Okay, so we're just going to get right into it. This most recent viewing, I got some Thing vibes. It didn't come off like they were ripping off the Thing, but the cinematography and how the film is shot, and of course the setting with it being super snowy and windy and kind of cold and desolate and isolated, it did give off some Thing vibes. And actually, funnily enough, when I first started this movie, Meadow asked me, so who do you think would win in a fight, the Thing or the Alien and Predator? Or how about the Thing, Alien and Predator, and the Demogorgon? And to both, I just said they would all be doomed because the Thing would just eat them.
Yeah, depending on whether the acid blood from the xenomorph would affect the Thing or not. But,
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
But no, to your point, yeah, there's definitely some homage going on there, and I'm sure Paul W.S. Anderson is a fan of the Thing.
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. If he likes Alien, I'm sure he likes the Thing.
Oh, for sure, because those are a good double feature, too. Also, there's, on my copy of the movie, the 2-disc unrated special edition, if you plug in the extras disc, the menu, it basically is like a real kind of creepy, animated shot of like the Bovatoy Island. There's a door that's open and the wind's howling and everything, and then like the different options for what you want to see pop up on the door. It's just really neat. That also kind of adds to the effect, even if it's like a home video thing. Anyway, continue.
It's not like I don't have that much to say about it, but just I do like the creepy atmosphere. And it also does evoke some Alien stuff too, because like the original Alien can be called like a haunted house movie in space. This is similar because this is a new and unexplored environment that humans have been in. It's tight and claustrophobic and creepy and dark. And once again, you have the fact that these xenomorphs seem to know this area just like the back of their hand in 10 seconds. Just like how Big Chap acted in the original Alien. I like the creepy atmosphere. I appreciate the Thing vibes. Again, it didn't seem like Paul was ripping it off. I just feel like he was taking just bits and pieces from stuff that he liked and then making his own thing out of it. No pun intended.
Well, in fact, and one more thing to note here is that he actually mentioned, I don't know if it was in a commentary or like an interview, the Predator ship waking up is supposed to be like the ship waking up, quote unquote, waking up in the original Alien. Also, even the ship in Aliens, Cameron referenced everything firing up after being asleep for a while. But yeah, it was kind of like a little subtle nod.
Alrighty. Let's see. Pro number 4 is the pacing of the film. No scene drags. There's no scene that feels rushed. No, not that I know of. Yeah, nothing drags, nothing is rushed, everything feels essential, which is why I think with these movies, I think you have to at least have an hour and 40-minute minimum. That's not too long, but it's not too short. It's just right. Um, and yeah, the movie flows very, very well. You're never bored. You're never antsy in your seat. And this helps because the next pro that I have, pro number 5, is the story and the lore. It's very intricate. It's very interesting, very well told, but it doesn't go on too long, thankfully. It's not like Fellowship of the Ring where the exposition takes up more than a third of the film, which it works in that film's favor. But I can see why some people would find that a bit stale and boring, is because there's so much explaining. But whatever. There's just enough exposition here that tells the entire history of the Alien and Predator lore in just a few minutes. That's all that it tells you, all that you need to know without going on too long. And just in general, it's fascinating. And I would absolutely love to see some origin comics of like how the Predators came to encounter the Xenomorphs, how they, came across Earth. It tells you how, or it tells you what happens, but of course, you'd like to know how. But you can just kind of infer from context. Yeah, it's very well done. It's very well explained too, and I like that they incorporated that into humans' natural history. Well, natural, quote unquote. Some people may see it as a cop out, that they're just pretty much saying, "Oh yeah, the pyramids were built by humans and aliens," but what the hell else could you have done? So yeah, I think it's well done. It's well told. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and it's fascinating stuff. And again, it's a good interweaving of Alien and Predator lore, which, yeah, I think is good.
There's also, I mean, it makes sense too. I kind of brought this up for Predator 2 yesterday. There's like an Aztec or Mayan kind of aesthetic to the Predators anyway, in terms of like their rituals and whatnot, the manhood rituals and stuff like that. So it only makes sense for them to end up being the extraterrestrial race that actually influenced primitive cultures. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So there you go. Pro number 6 is, this one's a bit minor, but the lighting, I think, is very good in this movie. This helps to the creepy atmosphere. There's lots of moments where, now it's not like the next movie, but there's a lot of dark areas, but the darkness helps to the creepy claustrophobic environment. It's not like Godzilla 20.
See what's going on.
Yeah, you can still see what's going on, but there just is a lot of darkness and a lot of shadows that helps to hiding both the Yautja and also the Xenomorphs. And it just lends itself to the creepy environment. But like when people are outside, when they're out of the pyramid, it's still, well lit to the point where like you can tell it's night, but you can also still see what's going on. I just like the lighting. I always like the lighting in this film. Pro number 7 is the action scenes in this movie are pretty damn entertaining. There's admittedly kind of not that much. Well, there's a fair bit. It's just evenly sprinkled throughout the film. You have the initial, the Predators come and kill the Mercs. Then there's the first encounter in the pyramid with the Predators. Then, of course, there's Celtic versus Grid, which is fucking badass. Really reminds me of King Kong versus Godzilla a little bit. Though in this scenario, unfortunately, King Kong is the winner. And then there's like the little bits of action with Scar taking down Xenos left and right. And then finally, there's the third act with Lex teaming up with Scar, and the movie is just like almost nonstop action until the end of it. Then, of course, you have the climactic Scar and Lex versus the Queen Alien, which is awesome.
I do like the small scene where after the predators have realized the guns have been taken, Scar is sent after after the fall of them, and I like the bit. It's very predator. It's a very predator-esque moment whenever he's up. They're walking down the hallway, and on the sides there's the sculptures and the hieroglyphics and everything, and he actually kind of blends in with those because he stays still for a second.
Yeah.
And I like how he tries to get one back. He uses an invisible rope or rope.
It was a barbed wire.
It's just a very good little predator moment, and the fact that he leaps across, and that's when he cloaks again.
Yeah, that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all the action scenes are very well done. They're well edited, surprisingly. There's not too much shaky cam. It's very well done. The cameras, there's a little bit of shaky cam with Grid versus Celtic, but I think that works because it's a pretty hectic fight. But it is still, other than that, it's mostly well edited. Yeah, they're just fun. They're entertaining. This movie certainly does deliver on Alien versus Predator again, and they're satisfying as hell to watch. And especially watching Scar just almost effortlessly take down these Xenos, it's so fun. I actually remember laughing my ass off the first time that I saw Scar just whoosh, slice that Xeno's head off. I was just like, oh, okay. So this dude's not to be fucked with. And he doesn't even hesitate, too. He just immediately, like, as soon as he sees that face hugger coming at him, he looks. Whoosh, whoosh, love it.
And then it comes back like a boomerang, and then he wipes it off, and then he holsters it again.
Yeah, love the action scenes. And this, of course, leads me into the fantastic special effects. Yeah, I love the special effects in this movie. The suitimation is very well done. The suits are well made. They're absolutely seamless and flawless. Some may have an issue with how big and bulky the Predators are in this movie. I don't really. That just makes them look more imposing and badass. And they make good foils to the Xenomorphs. Like the Xenomorphs are the agile speedsters, whereas the Predators are the big, bulky juggernauts. And I love that about them. The suitimation for the Xenomorphs, too, is very well done. The suits are well done. They don't crease. They don't look like suits. They're pleasantly slimy and ooey and gooey. They do look a little tame and like sanitized, as Trev likes to put it, which I do agree with. We'll talk about that later, but they still look really good. What little we have, like the Yautja gore looks really good. All the slime and the effects for the Xenomorph nest look really good. It's slimy and ooey and gooey. The optical animation for the plasma caster looks really good. Well, I have an issue with that thing, but whatever. And the fucking Queen alien in this movie, pitch perfect. The CGI model looks really good, and the animatronics that they use for this Queen Xenomorph is just fucking spectacular. When she is awoken, when she's still frozen, I totally buy that as a real creature waking up after being sleeping in ice. Absolutely flawless effects. So yeah, the special effects in this movie are absolutely fucking stellar. And one thing I will say about the Queen, am I the only one who thinks that she is a lot like a T-Rex in this movie?
Oh yeah, for sure. And this obviously came out after Jurassic Park, so I'm sure they thought, well, the Queen is a big, terrifying thing like a T-Rex, so let's get that influence from the JP T-Rex, and which was also a Stan Winston creation, and maybe that was some homage going on there.
Well, I just think it's only natural because she's a bipedal giant monster, so whatever. Yeah, the Queen alien looks fantastic. All the Predators look great. Most of the digital effects look pretty decent, though we'll get to that later. Yeah, the special effects in this movie are absolutely top notch. And Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. were on the top of their game with this film. And they used a $60 to $70 million budget very, very, very well. And anyone who tries to critique this movie's effects, I really think you're just trying to be a crowd rouser, and you need to just shut your mouth.
Yeah.
Any cons?
Yeah, I have two, but I also wanted to mention another little moment that I liked, and it's in the extended edition. Again, since this is technically our Predator series, I think there's a nice Predator moment added in the extended version. It's actually what kind of makes the extended Whalen death worth it is because at the very end of that scene, we have the classic a predator is trying to decipher what somebody has said. You know, like in the original movie, it's stuff that Billy or Mac was saying. In Predator 2, it was the one Jamaican who said "shit happens," or the little kid saying "wants some candy." In this, it's actually much more plot relevant because Scar realizes, or he begins to realize that maybe the humans might be beneficial, other than the fact that they took his guns. Because Sebastian is like, we got to keep them from making it to the surface. But he also says that they're going to try and make it to the surface. And he's like, well, I don't want the guns to go up there. But anyway, I like the moment because it's a classic Predator. He's figuring out what somebody's saying. It kind of does the constant replay thing. It's just a nice little moment. But yeah, my two cons, and they're going to be brief because there's not a whole lot to say about them. My number one con is that even though I actually did feel better about it, this kind of happens on and off whenever I watch the movie. Sometimes I'm like, I didn't really care for how Anderson handled the Predator stuff. But then other times I'm like, yeah, he did a pretty good job. But he still clearly favors the xenomorphs and Alien overall. I mean, clearly the tone and the atmosphere of the movie very much harkens to Alien, or like we mentioned The Thing, which is pretty much a peas in a pod with the original Alien. So a lot of stuff that he references are from that, but he also at the same time, to negate this con, I guess you'd say, he also does things that improve the Predators a little bit, like he makes the wrist gauntlets longer. He makes the shoulder cannon not so small, and it actually has a nice little swivel to it. And it seems to even pack more of a punch than it did in the first two movies. So yeah, he does add some good things there, but I do feel that if you asked him which one of the two was his favorite, he probably would say Alien. And that's okay. I mean, he still delivered a good movie with both, and that's what matters.
Well, also, if you listen to his commentary on the first Resident Evil movie, he makes quite a few references to Alien. And you can argue that there's a lot of similarities between the first Resident Evil movie and the original Alien.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And also, even in Monster Hunter, in the special features for that, I forgot what the creature's called. It's something Scylla. Nursilla, probably something like that. They're these bug things, these real creepy bug things in the movie that he says are basically a spider meets the alien from Alien. And so I was like, well, yeah, you definitely really, Alien made a major impact on you, and I can see it.
Well, because he stated in the making of featurette for this movie that he like snuck into the theaters to watch the original Alien, and in his words, and it just scared the living daylights out of me. And I had a giant crush on Sigourney Weaver. I thought she was the sexiest woman in the world. That's my kind of bad Paul W.S. Anderson impression, but you see what I mean.
No, that wasn't too bad. I really wish that he had done his own commentary in this movie, because he does have a commentary, and it makes me. It's an actress problem, not the character. Sanaa Lathan, she I don't know if she didn't want to be there, but she just kind of like whenever you're listening to it, it's just her reactions and commentary on things are just so typically. And I don't mean to sound sexist whenever I say this, but it's so girly. She's clearly not like a fan of the movies, and she's just kind of, whenever she was acting as Lex, she was really acting. And Lance Henriksen is also there, and he's a very professional, very polite showman. He's there. He provides some good bits here and there, but he actually answers a phone call during the commentary, which I was like, ugh. And then I was thinking, like, well, I really wish Paul had just been sitting here talking about it, because I think he would have done better on his own. But I digress. He's clearly an Alien fan, which is fine. He also seems to have made a reference back to this movie in Monster Hunter, because the main character in that, Artemis, she teams up with Tony Jaa's Hunter, and there's a dynamic that's very similar to Lex and Scar, which I appreciated as a fan of this movie and Anderson's work in general. Okay, and so the last con, is the rating. This is kind of like Terminator Genesis. It's only a problem if you really let it bother you, because the movie still does good by its IP and the franchise, in my opinion, if you're not a stick in the mud.
Like a majority of Terminator fans?
Yeah, or you can even say that for Alien and Predator fans too, unfortunately.
Them too?
But no, this movie probably would have been obviously even better if it had just, had that grit and that gore to it. You could say that Requiem was kind of trying to overcompensate for it, and it kind of does in some instances, but more on that tomorrow.
Yep.
But still, and like Nick has said, I mentioned that the movie does look kind of sanitized. It has a very smooth,
clean,
futuristic almost look to it, which I think definitely also plays into Paul favoring the Alien movies, because it feels like that kind of aesthetic. And the Predator movies usually have some kind of rough grunginess to them, whether they're like in a gang war in LA or in a jungle somewhere. There's always that kind of grunge and grit to it, which is kind of missing to an extent, but he makes up for it with the lore that he adds to the Predator.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I finally realized that realized it again. Again, it's a very off and on type thing when I'm watching the movie. Sometimes it bothers me, sometimes it doesn't. And thankfully, whenever I did my second rewatch, I appreciated the package as a whole and not little nitpicks that I had. So yeah, those would be the two things I would hold against the movie if you really pressed me on it.
All right, so mine, I technically have 6 cons, but 3 of them are nitpicks, but they do kind of, no. One of them ties into another. Or no, not really. Or yeah, one of them ties into one of them, so I'll explain as I go along. But con number 1 is that, the lack of human gore is a bit noticeable, especially coming off of Predator 2, which, as we mentioned before, was supposed to be NC-17, but then they had to cut it down a little bit. You go from that, and then you go to this, which the unrated extended cut tries to, like with what Trev says, not overcome, but like kind of rectify that. And I do think Fox realized not necessarily their error, but they were just like maybe this wasn't necessary. So they tried to rectify that, and to varying degrees with the added digital blood. Sometimes it's fine, but there's a couple spots where it's just you can tell that was definitely added in post.
It's the George Lucas effect.
Yeah, the George Lucas effect, which this isn't nowhere near as well. I don't think the special editions of Star Wars are bad, but like the first wave of special editions were bad.
It's not as jarring as the special editions.
There you go. Yeah. Except for the moment when Lance dies, the really badly digitally added wrist blades that just quickly slip out of Lance's body. That was the only one that kind of threw me off. Yeah. Because it's very obvious that after Scar had stabbed him, once he yanked his hand out, you could tell that the blades are all the way out of him. But then you cut back to a back shot of Charles, and you see the blades quickly just zip out of his body. It is a bit clumsily edited. But yeah, the lack of gore is not a huge problem, because it never really bugged me, because the rest of the alien gore kind of made up for the lack of human gore. And also because this is a fight between aliens and Predator, you expect there to be a lot of carnage between these two. The humans are just kind of caught in the middle. But yeah, the PG-13 rating doesn't hurt the movie, but it does kind of hinder it a little bit. It's not like the RoboCop 2014 remake where the PG-13 rating is arguably that film's biggest flaw. Here it was just kind of or RoboCop 3, yeah. Here it was just kind of like a questionable decision that it just felt unnecessary. That's the worst that it could be. It was just an unnecessary change, but they worked with what they had, and I think what they did was just fine. And also, if it really does bug you, you can just go straight to the unrated extended cut. Yeah, it's a George Lucas job, but better than nothing.
Well, I mean, even if the gore doesn't satisfy you, the digital gore, the longer bits in the movie do, just like with any of the Alien movies, because this would actually technically be the only Predator movie next to Requiem that has an extended cut, but it's also the Alien factor. All the Alien movies, or the first four, have a longer version.
True.
And I think those longer versions do improve them. So yeah, there you go.
Con number 2 is that yes, well, I listed it as painfully, but now that I think about it, I don't think that's true. But it is very obvious that Paul W.S. Anderson is an Alien fan. And I think he was just like overindulging himself a little too much. And he wasn't focusing enough on, well, quite enough on the Predators. Because this ties into one of my nitpicks. Celtic and Chopper are just throwaway predators. They're just there to be killed off by aliens. And also, this is the only example that I can think of where technically the monster that I favor loses.
Yeah.
But it's kind of debatable too, because had Scar not been handicapped with the fucking discarding of weapons, which just drives me nuts. There's so many of these movies where the Predators just like seemingly discard their weapons just to make the plot easier, that just drive me nuts. And here it's probably at its worst because they have to get rid of Scar's plasma caster to make the fight between him and the Queen more in favor of the Queen. What they could have done is that in the explosion, his plasma caster was damaged and he could only fire it off maybe once or twice. And that was what he could have done to defeat the Queen Alien. This also leads into another nitpick. Why does Scar have to die? Yes, it does lead into Requiem, which is a nice twist. Well, not really a twist, but like it's another, oh yeah, moment where you kind of forget about it. But then at the very end, the movie makes you realize, oh yeah, he was impregnated. And it is a good way to set up the sequel. It's not like some could see it as a super sequel bait ending. Well, at least it got a sequel, so it's not guilty of that. Like so many movies that have sequel bait endings, but they never get a sequel. What's a bad example?
The Mummy, the 2017 movie.
Okay, yeah, there's a good one for you. Well, that one's even worse because, huh?
There's actually so many, so that's just one that popped in my head.
Well, that one's probably one of the worst because not only is it begging for a sequel, it's begging for a franchise.
Yeah. Well, and even this ending here, even if they didn't make a sequel for whatever reason, it would just be a reference to the Pred aliens in the comics and the video games and whatnot. It doesn't beg to be elaborated on, but you can. That's actually the best kind of quote unquote cliffhanger ending, is that everything is resolved for that individual movie, but you could leave something hanging that will be elaborated on, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be a gotcha moment.
Like Return of the Jedi. You didn't need another. Yeah. You didn't need the sequel trilogy. Well, obviously Disney needed it, but it bit them in the ass. But like the original Star Wars trilogy is wrapped up, but there's plenty of room to expand more, which there was. But so I already talked about that. Like the aliens are favored. Not as bad as I initially thought, but yes, they are favored. There's the lack of gore. I don't like that Scar has to die, which that's actually not a nitpick. That's an issue. So I have 4 cons. But Celtic and Chopper just there to be cannon fodder. The lack of Predator weapons, like the plasma caster, is so underused in this movie. It's not even funny. And also, they just keep discarding their fucking weapons. It just drives me insane. Because to me, it just feels like Scar is just under-equipped by the end of it to take on the Queen Xenomorph. Obviously, he tries, which is good, but
Really,
still,
here's what I think happened, and I have no way of confirming this, but the execution of the movie kind of seems to imply it. If Paul Anderson had been offered just an Alien 5, he probably would have preferred that. But since this was the only alien-related thing that Fox wanted to pursue at the time, he obviously said, okay, sure, I'll do that. And I mean, again, he doesn't, it's not as bad as some people make it out to be with the Predators, but again, the favoritism is there. But
yeah,
continue.
And it's obvious. The last con that I have is the inconsistent alien biology. Why do they grow so quick? This is really the biggest thing that's such an issue, because they establish in the first Alien movie that, yeah, it takes a while for them to be impregnated, and it takes a while for the chest burster to develop and burst their way out. Here, it happens in the span of 5 minutes, seemingly. Now, from what Trev has told me, that apparently there was it a deleted scene, or was it just like a cliff note type thing that was just left out of the movie?
It's more of like a cliff note or something, kind of like the internal development that the creature creators do, like because there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into like the concepts for the movie that aren't necessarily explained in the movie itself whenever you're like doing pre-production and production and whatnot. So I do believe ADI, Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis, they did mention that the queen is supposed to be injected with some kind of hormone or something to that effect that affects the growth rate of the eggs that she produces, and therefore the xenomorphs.
So they're on steroids.
Again, it's not mentioned in the actual movie, so.
And yeah, that's the thing. I know it would have been kind of clunky to have a line that explains why they grow so quick, but at least they would have acknowledged it. But here it just kind of comes off as being really inconsistent and a tad rushed. Like Paul just wanted so badly to hurry up and cut out all the fat and just get right to the good stuff.
Well, there's also, and this is an inconsistency unless you're like informed on other versions of like other movies. Some people could say that Scar dying and then the chest burster still coming out anyway would negate the fact that in Alien 3, Ripley wanted somebody to kill her before the Queen burster came out of her, because she thought, well, if she was dead, then the Queen burster wouldn't come out. But as we saw in the assembly cut of Alien 3, the dead ox still produces the runner xenomorph. So that's just something that the characters don't know about that happens off screen. But if somebody wanted the critique, it's an invalid critique, but I've heard it out there in places that say, well, why would the bred alien still come out if he was dead? Well, there's
it's also a bit more problematic with Scar because he was impaled through the chest already.
And see, then it becomes a fact where you just say, well, maybe her tail missed it. So I don't know.
That's kind of I mean, yeah, that's pretty much the only thing you can say, but that kind of just is a bit of a lazy excuse. But whatever.
Yeah, so I would, even with that behind the scenes tidbit, you could just say overall that in order to service the plot so it wouldn't just have to have so much exposition, they probably did streamline some things, and it does result in inconsistencies.
Unfortunately.
It's only a problem if you let it be.
Exactly, yeah. Which it never bugged me at first. It probably won't bug me again, but I did kind of notice it on this more in this recent viewing. I was just like, damn, they grew quick. And the last nitpick that I have, this is more just like a preference thing, is I think the lack of the queen alien is a bit not really problematic, but it does stick out to me. Like she's just there as a plot device and a final boss, and that's it. Now her placement as the final boss is awesome, and the effects on her are fantastic, which I also have to mention too. One of my favorite effect shots is when the queen rips away from her egg laying tube. Looks nasty as fuck. Unlike in the original Aliens, which there it's fine because you have to understand it was the limitation of the effects, but it also does look painful and nasty. But here, when she removes herself from the egg laying tube, it's like almost like her water's breaking because there's just this eruption of slime and gore and fluid as she tears herself away from the egg laying tube, and it's a sight to behold almost. But yeah, the lack of the queen alien is slightly problematic because I want to see more of her because she's one of my favorite giant monsters. But her placement in the story is fine, and you couldn't really have done it any other way.
Well, more to your point, what they could have done is that they could have had the other xenomorphs break her out sooner, and there could have been like a cat and mouse game with Lex and Scar and the rest of the xenomorphs being led by the queen while she was trying to find them.
Yep. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Could have done that too. So, anything else you want to add, Trev?
No, I think we've actually probably provided one of the best discussions about this movie in recent memory, if I'm being honest. Because most people tend to shit on it, the bastards.
Fuck you.
No, I'll just say, even though my feelings about how the two monsters are handled kind of varies between viewing to viewing. Like sometimes I think, well, this really it feels more like an Alien movie, but it needs to be a Predator movie because that franchise was for a time shorter than the Alien movies. So again, the narrative does beg that the Predators be more of the focus. And I think, again, it just depends on what you let bother you about whatever little nitpicks are there in the story or like how it's executed. But no, I think while there's definitely been a following, probably mainly people who grew up with the movie who have come out in support of it recently.
Like us.
Like with the Star Wars prequels, oddly enough.
That too.
It definitely has a following now. It's among one of the better rated movies in the franchise. If you go looking at that sort of thing, which I mentioned again at the start, I think, and also in conversation with Nick. I've actually always enjoyed it. I think it actually kind of to the point of what Nick said yesterday with Predator 2 and the relationship between Predator and Predator 2. Even though Requiem has a lot more faults in this movie, I do think there are things that it does better, which kind of balance out the bad parts of this movie. But then it's also a vice versa, where the good of this movie is far superior to what happens in that one. So they do definitely come across as a good double feature or a pair of movies.
So this one's more uneven.
Yeah, it's always been a favorite. I don't see it changing anytime soon. I think anybody who probably has disliked it in the past or has never seen it should give it a look if they're like exploring the franchise for the first time. I think it's definitely a must. Mm-hmm. And then Requiem is kind of figure it out, kind of test your limits for the franchise.
It's an acquired taste.
Acquired taste. Yeah, there's definitely some entries in both series that are acquired tastes, and it's no different here. And so, for a final rating, I think I will give this, probably after this discussion, another 8 out of 10.
You were going to give it a 6 originally.
6 or 7, but now that I think about it, the goods far outweigh the bad. So, 8 out of 10 for me.
Well, for me, Alien vs. Predator, once again, is one of my favorite films of all time. And while ironically, even though I think this is a better made movie than Freddy versus Jason, I just enjoy that one a bit more for some reason.
It's balls to the walls crazy, and this one kind of has to limit itself.
Yes. Well, yeah, there you go. So there you go. Because that one's a hard R rating and this one's well, whatever. So yeah, I love this movie to death. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of my favorite installments in the franchise, and it's just a fun flick. Again, as I've said multiple times, it promises Alien versus Predator, and it fucking delivers on Alien versus Predator, which is why I'll be giving it a solid 8.5 out of 10. Trev, anything to plug?
Yeah, I will be. He'll upload it at his discretion. But I am supposed to be recording my review clips for Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again for Daikaiju Space Illa's channel, because he's trying to work his way through most of the Toho monster movies. It was supposed to be a lead up to Godzilla versus Kong, but he's had some trouble with his channel and copyright and whatnot. So he's still doing it, but it's after the fact. But it's something of a celebration, I guess you'd say. So yeah, I'll be helping him out with the first two Godzilla movies and eventually Rodan, and we'll see where we go from there. So yeah, that's what I have coming up in the pipeline.
Look forward to tomorrow's review, where me and Trev will tackle easily one of the most uneven installments of the entire franchise.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, God. And it's been a long time since I've watched it myself. When we discussed 2007? Yeah, 7.
December 2007.
2007's Alien vs. Predator Requiem. And as always, go out and go to Antarctica, avoid the thing, and have yourself a big game hunt between some Xenos and the Yautja species. And I will see you guys in the next video.